Politeness becomes a prison when it teaches you to hide desire before anyone resists you. The damage is not that other people control you. The damage is that your own preference starts arriving late, as if it needs clearance to enter the room. A menu opens and your thumb stays pinned on the laminated edge instead of moving. Someone says, "Anything works for me," and a small wave of relief passes through your chest before you even notice whether you are hungry. That is not flexibility. That is appetite being smuggled past imagined authorities. Once that reflex sets in, you stop having clean preferences. You produce edited versions. You hand the room a harmless draft of yourself, then call the missing pieces maturity. The trap is subtle because it looks civilized. No one has to bark orders. No one has to punish you out loud. The whole mechanism can run on anticipation alone. You learn to present a preference only after it has been trimmed, softened, and made easy to accept. By the time you speak, you are no longer reporting what you want. You are reporting what survived inspection. That habit does not stay in restaurants or group plans. It enters money, time, study, rest, ambition, and speech. It trains you to feel desire as exposure. It teaches your body that wanting something clearly is dangerous, not because the world is always hostile, but because you have become your own customs officer. The earliest sign is not silence, it is pre-editing. You do not say, "I want this." You say, "This might be fine, unless everyone would rather do something else." You offer your preference with a built-in escape hatch, as if the room should never have to bear the weight of your clarity. That wording sounds considerate, but it performs a quiet self-betrayal. It teaches everyone present, including you, that your desire is provisional until endorsed. The body gives itself away during that moment. Your shoulders stay narrow. Your mouth gives a small half-smile that asks for permission before the sentence is even finished. When someone chooses differently, you nod too fast, and the speed of that nod tells the truth before your words do. The room learns that your preference can be displaced without friction. After enough repetitions, you learn it too. Clean preferences create clean information. Contaminated preferences create social fog. Once you start diluting your own signal, other people cannot tell whether you are easygoing, afraid, detached, or simply absent. That confusion often gets mislabeled as peace. It is not peace. It is disappearance performed in a pleasant tone. Around a shared table, this mechanism becomes embarrassingly visible. You scan faces before you scan your own appetite. Someone says they are open to anything, and instead of treating that as neutral space, you treat it as a warning that your answer could become inconvenient. Now your attention leaves your body and enters the room. You stop tasting your own preference and start calculating acceptable options. A familiar scene proves it. The group chat has already spent 20 minutes avoiding a decision. Screens keep lighting with polite indecision, little bubbles of "I'm good with whatever" and no strong preference here. You know exactly where you want to go. You even looked at the menu earlier. Then your fingers hover over the keyboard while your stomach tightens because the clear answer suddenly feels too heavy. You delete the name of the place once, type it again with an apology attached, then replace it with a safer sentence that asks what everyone else is leaning toward. Hunger was present first. Social weather replaced it. By the time a decision lands, you feel oddly blameless and oddly erased. This is how private appetite gets converted into administrative behavior. Desire becomes paperwork. Before a wish can pass through your mouth, it gets checked for risk, size, timing, and public convenience. Some people call that emotional intelligence. Most of the time it is fear with better manners. The next layer is worse because it happens before speech. You start rehearsing objections that nobody has made. The mind drafts a hostile committee out of thin air. It predicts the sigh, the raised eyebrow, the subtle disappointment, the invisible inconvenience you might cause by wanting something specific. Then it negotiates with those ghosts until your original preference comes out shrunken. That internal committee does not need to be realistic to become powerful. It only needs to feel familiar. Many people learned it at family tables where one person's mood could redefine what counted as reasonable. The lesson was not always stated. It was absorbed through pace, silence, and aftermath. A clear request could produce tension, so the nervous system learned to file the request down before it was spoken. Years later, no parent or elder is in the room, but the old inspection procedure still runs. The cost is larger than indecision. A person who repeatedly negotiates against imaginary resistance becomes easy to direct. Not because they are weak, but because they arrive already softened. They ask for less time than they need, less space than they need, less help than they need, less joy than they want. Then they call the resulting exhaustion proof that adulthood requires restraint. It does not. Exhaustion is often just the bill for constant self-redaction. The room does not have to forbid your appetite if you forbid it first. That sentence lands hardest in ordinary places. A friend asks where to meet, and your first impulse is a specific answer. By the second, you are already revising for convenience. In a study group, you want the earlier time because your concentration is better before evening, but you hide the reason and say the later slot is probably fine. At a family gathering, you want to leave after an hour, yet you stay until the air feels stale, because departing on time feels ruder than betraying your own limit. None of these moments look dramatic. Their damage accumulates precisely because they look minor. Minor betrayals train major ones. A nervous system does not separate the tiny surrender from the large surrender as neatly as the intellect does. It simply records a pattern. Clear desire leads to tension. Pre-compliance leads to relief. Relief gets rewarded, so the reflex strengthens. This is why some people can defend their values in theory and still vanish inside live situations. Principle survives on paper, preference collapses in rooms, another distortion follows. You begin to respect yourself for being low maintenance. That identity feels clean. It earns social approval. It lets you imagine that you are above need, above fuss, above ordinary appetite. Underneath that image is often a humiliating truth. You are not above need. You have just become skilled at expressing it in forms that no one could reasonably reject. You do not order what you want. You request what would be easiest to grant. In that condition, gratitude becomes counterfeit. You thank people for scraps of space that should never have required a permit. You feel excessive for normal wants. You overvalue small accommodations because your baseline expectation has already been lowered. Then the body sends the unpaid invoice. Jaw pressure, sudden fatigue after simple gatherings, a flat mood on days that were technically successful, irritation with no obvious cause. These are not random flaws. They are often compressed desire with nowhere honest to go. One of the clearest self-recognition scenes happens in planning, not conflict. A trip is being arranged among people who all sound agreeable. Times are floated. Routes are suggested. You know which option leaves you less depleted and less rushed, but the moment your preference becomes visible, you feel a quiet heat in the face. You imagine being the difficult one, so you choose the schedule that fits everyone else a little better and you a lot worse. The next morning starts too early, the transit is crowded, and your patience wears thin before the day has even properly opened. Later you blame yourself for being irritable, even though the irritation began at the exact moment you abandoned your own information. That is how self-erasure protects its image. It hides the cause and then judges the symptom. The original betrayal gets framed as maturity. The later resentment gets framed as your personality defect. You do not notice the chain, so you keep repairing the wrong part of the system. Social groups quietly reward this pattern because it keeps decisions frictionless. The person who wants little is easy to carry. The person who speaks late can be overruled without visible cruelty. The person who cushions every sentence makes everyone else feel generous. None of that means the group is evil. It means groups are often lazy around soft boundaries. If your signals arrive padded, many people will step on them without ever feeling like aggressors. This is where Stoic language gets abused. Acceptance is not the same as self-deletion. Discipline is not the same as anticipatory surrender. The strong mind can tolerate not getting what it wants. That is different from never letting itself want anything clearly in the first place. One is command, the other is fear disguised as virtue. A sharper form of the trap appears when you start editing not only your choices but your tastes. You begin to prefer what will travel well socially, books that will not need defending, plans that will not inconvenience anyone, clothes, routines, hobbies, even ambitions that can pass through a room without provoking comment. This feels efficient. It is actually colonization. Public comfort starts furnishing your inner life. What gets lost in that shift is easy to miss. Surprise disappears, so does idiosyncrasy. You become legible, smooth, easy to place, and strangely hard to know. People may call you calm, they may call you mature, they may even call you generous. Yet your own experience of yourself becomes thinner because the raw material of a life is preference, and preference has been treated like contraband for so long that you no longer trust it in daylight. Borrowing other people's preferences can feel socially elegant because it removes the burden of authorship. You let the louder taste set the pattern. You tell yourself they care more, or they know better, or it matters less to you anyway. Sometimes that is true. Repeated too often, it becomes intellectual laziness toward your own life. You stop discovering what you would have chosen because discovery itself has begun to feel inefficient. That is one reason this mechanism makes people feel strangely blank. Their tastes are not gone. Their tastes are underused. This underuse has moral consequences as well. When you chronically suppress preference, resentment has to find a more acceptable costume. It comes out as dryness, low-grade contempt, sudden withdrawal, unexplained tiredness, private criticism, or the cold sentence you say only after the whole interaction is over. Then you look at that delayed bitterness and think it proves you were wrong to want anything. It proves the opposite. It proves the signal was blocked until it had to travel underground. A healthy boundary often begins as a very plain sentence. I am leaving at 8. I do not want that option. I can join for 1 hour, not 3. I'm not spending on that today. Those lines are not grand expressions of identity. They are maintenance of reality. The longer they are delayed, the more force they eventually require. People who fear tension often create larger tension by trying to avoid the smallest truthful sentence. There is another reason anticipatory politeness spreads so easily. It creates immediate social rewards. You look adaptable. You look easy. You seem emotionally literate because you are constantly tracking everyone else. But this reputation is unstable. The moment you begin speaking from an unedited preference, some people will claim you have changed. In a narrow sense, they are right. You have changed from being frictionless to being present. Presence alters status. A person with preferences can no longer be moved around like spare material. Their timing matters. Their energy matters. Their refusals have to be counted in advance instead of absorbed after the fact. This is why even decent people can unconsciously prefer the softened version of you. It keeps planning simple. It keeps the social surface smooth. It does not keep your life intact. A second self-recognition scene appears after the event is over. You are home, shoes off, door closed. The body finally loosens, and a delayed sentence arrives with irritating clarity. I did not want any of that. You can trace the whole evening backward. The restaurant you did not choose. The extra stop you agreed to. The length of the visit you pretended was fine. The topic you let keep running because redirecting it would have felt impolite. None of those concessions seemed fatal in real time. In private, they line up like evidence. The fatigue you were calling introversion is suddenly more specific. It is the fatigue of carrying a false version of your appetite for hours. People often answer this discovery with another mistake. They swing from self-erasure to theatrical defiance. They decide every preference must now be announced hard, fast, and publicly. That usually fails because it is still reactive. It still grants the room too much authority. The answer is not to become rude as compensation for having been porous. The answer is to stop treating your own signals like suspicious goods that require special handling. That begins with timing. A real preference should be felt before it is negotiated. If you always read the room first, the room becomes the author. If you check your body first, the room becomes context instead of command. That distinction changes everything. It means hunger gets named before diplomacy starts. It means fatigue gets admitted before plans are accepted. It means time, money, attention, and rest stop entering the conversation as hidden casualties. There is also a dignity issue here that people underestimate. Every time you disguise a desire to make it more acceptable, you practice presenting yourself as less real than you are. Repetition makes that performance feel natural. Soon you are not only withholding information from other people. You are withholding it from yourself. Memory changes under that pressure. You remember yourself as more compliant than you were, less interested than you were, less harmed than you were. A false record begins to form, and you start living according to notes written under social duress. The body resists this fiction in small ways. It stalls. It delays replies. It grows dull in conversations where it used to feel awake. It suddenly overreacts to tiny decisions because dozens of earlier decisions were swallowed whole. People call this indecision, oversensitivity, moodiness, lack of resilience. Sometimes it is none of those things. Sometimes it is buried preference trying to regain legal status. An anonymized case makes the structure plain. Someone joins a recurring community dinner because it is supposed to feel simple. The first few weeks seem harmless. Each time a plan is discussed, they defer quickly, smile, and adapt. They tell themselves that nothing matters enough to make a fuss. Over time, their role hardens. They become the easy one, the one who can squeeze into any seat, tolerate any timing, eat anywhere, stay a little later, spend a little more, carry the extra bag, absorb the extra stop. Then one evening they decline a last-minute change because they are already tired and over budget. The table goes quiet for half a second too long. No one explodes. No one insults them. But the shock on a few faces reveals the truth. Their flexibility had not been read as generosity. It had been entered as available capacity. That is why recovery must include visible friction, not chaos, not performance. Friction, a clear answer given before you can soften it. A departure that happens when your limit arrives instead of when the room grants release. A preference stated without the decorative apology that usually escorts it. The point is not domination. The point is evidence. Your nervous system needs proof that clarity can survive contact. Some people around you will adapt immediately because they never required your self-erasure in the first place. Others will look startled, disappointed, or vaguely inconvenienced. That reaction is useful data. It tells you who was relating to you and who was relating to your edit. The distinction can sting. It also returns reality to the room. This pattern is not simple kindness. Kindness has choice inside it. This mechanism does not. Kindness can say yes with a full spine and no without collapse. This pattern says yes before the self has even been consulted. One preserves dignity while cooperating. The other spends dignity to keep cooperation looking smooth. The deeper danger is existential, not social. A life built on pre-approved desire starts to feel ghost-written. You keep making acceptable moves, yet your own days carry a strange lack of authorship. Nothing is openly stolen, but nothing feels fully claimed. That emptiness is not always depression. Often it is the cumulative effect of letting imagined inspection sit between impulse and action for too many years. By then the trap has become efficient. You censor before the world asks. You adapt before pressure arrives. You forgive the room before it has even wronged you. That speed is what makes the mechanism hard to see. There is no dramatic villain. There is just a person becoming increasingly governable through anticipatory courtesy. The correction is quieter than rebellion and harder than performance. Recovery starts when the preference is felt before it is marketed. It has to exist in plain form for one beat longer than is comfortable. Speech then comes from that beat instead of from the edited version. This sounds small. It is not small. It is the difference between living from appetite and living from paperwork. A perfect room is not required before the signal can be recovered. Rooms learn from what repeatedly enters them. If your wants only appear as soft drafts, that is all the world will ever meet. Clear appetite does not make you selfish. Chronic self-inspection makes you absent. When a person can no longer state a plain preference without internal inspection, they do not become peaceful. They become administratively easy to erase. This pattern reaches far beyond meals and plans into ambition, loyalty, money, study, and the shape of a life that can disappear while still looking polite. Stay with this channel if you'd rather understand the structure than admire the performance. The appetite you keep editing away will eventually take your whole voice with it.